Hi everyone, this is Jason Briark of Wall Street from Main Street and Eric Dubin. Welcome back to another Welcome to Dystopia podcast. This is episode number 6. We have as today's special guest, he was a lawyer, a very successful one for a while, and also an entrepreneur. And he just started, I think about 4 years ago. I think I was one of the first couple guests on his show, the Financial Survival Network, which I think has over 10 million downloads on iTunes now. Kerry Lutz, thank you for joining me.
Actually, we're up to about 14, but who's counting?
Wow, that's just amazing, Kerry. Very, very nice.
Yeah.
Well, Kerry, my first question for you on Welcome to Dystopia is you were a very successful lawyer up in New York City area. How did you find the Austrian School of Economics, and how did you start to wake up to what was going on and the narrative that, the mainstream media and Wall Street and the government, the stuff that they were saying wasn't, the full truth that was out in public?
Well, as far as how I found Austrian economics, kind of interesting. I saw the Milton Friedman, Rose Friedman special, Free to Choose, and I was in college at the time, and it made me think that I wanted to be an economist, and I switched my major to economics, but I didn't realize that Pace University, basically the econ department at that time before Joe Salerno got there, was staffed by a bunch of communists whose main goal was to unionize the faculty. And so that didn't last, but I got really into why places like Hong Kong work and why all the other places don't, and really got into just the whole thing and started reading and came across Mises and the Austrian School. And then Pace University had a really phenomenal business library, one of the best around. And I went into the library, and in the corner of the library, in a very dank, dark corner, there was Human Action, a bunch of books by Rothbard. I mean, there was just an amazing group of books dealing with Austrian and free market economics, and I was hooked. And that was really 40 years ago almost, 39 years ago. And I went into the business world thinking that, all right, it's all great in theory, and obviously maybe something's wrong. But then when crash hit in 2008, 2009, I realized, and I'd always looked at what the Fed was doing as a bad idea, and policies of socialism, giving more goodies out to get more votes, bad ideas, and then it just totally confirmed it for me. And I'd always had a distrust of government, going back to my father and his experience in the service in World War II, and just really never trusted any government officials ever. And nothing that's happened recently has changed my view on that.
That's very interesting. Yeah, and my grandfather had a very similar experience when he fought in World War II. He didn't trust the government. He didn't trust FDR. He grew up in the New York City area along with my grandmother during the Great Depression. So they didn't trust a lot of what the government said, and they always had, a certain amount of gold coins as insurance and things like that. So I guess that was, the mindset from the previous generation when they had more common sense. But that seems to have been, bred out of us.
Yeah, well, some of us, but I think a lot of you out there are learning that a healthy distrust of government is a very healthy thing.
Yeah, it seems like there's kind of a swinging back of the pendulum with millennials in particular having skepticism about big government and NSA surveillance and on and on.
Oh, yeah.
They do have that, but I don't know if I'd call them full libertarian. They have maybe some libertarian tendencies, like they want marijuana legalized, and they don't want all their data stored and things like that. But they still, when I try to have conversations with them, intelligent ones, and nowadays, like when I go to a bar, I don't bring that up anymore, especially because it's around D.C. and a lot of girls really want to talk about politics and how much they love Obama and Hillary Clinton. So I just kind of change the topic if I can, or otherwise, I'm not going to get a phone number or anything. But
Jason, you really need to move to a different place.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. Really think you can trust people that believe in government force. Government is the solution to all problems, but they're the ones that are going to sell you out when push comes to shove. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and it's all a bunch of lawyers. I mean, like mostly lawyers around here in D.C. Kerry. I mean, you were a lawyer for a while. I went to law school, and it was very frustrating and mental torture to be in law school. I mean, so much ridiculous research, a lot of overkill there, especially with the new legal databases that you could look up a couple cases online really quick, but they wanted you to do it by hand in the law library and things like that. I think the legal system is a total mess right now, and, rule of law has been changed. The lobbyists are basically getting whatever they want here in D.C. Do you think the legal system is a total disaster?
Well, when you put it that way, yes. But seriously, what the legal system's turned into compared to what way it was conceived, it's not about justice. It's not about a search for the truth. Those are distant cousins of the legal system as it stands now, and it's been corrupted just like everything else, Jason. Eric, I mean, I don't want to get into personal stories about it, but basically, that just the way you've seen the Supreme Court deal with ever-expanding government for years and years and years, they never even overturned a law passed by Congress. So when you see that, you can't say that all of them are constitutional. I mean, it's crazy. So really, it's just emblematic of the complete corruption of our society.
Yeah, Kerry, and it seems like the laws change all the time. The goalposts get moved. My rule number one for investing, and I talked about this on one of your shows, is that the politicians can change the rules anytime they want. And I think that's because there's most of the people in power, either they have law degrees or they can hire the best lawyers money can buy. So they could just, if they don't like the laws or people vote and get the laws changed, they can, just lobby and get the laws changed. And that's what it seems to me right now. I mean, we have politicians like Obama who go on and say, Obamacare is not a tax, right, to get the law passed. And then, the Supreme Court rules, well, it is a tax, and that's why we can't stop it. So it's typical politician, I guess, do what I say, not what I do, I guess.
Yeah, it's a real syllogism, the law. And you could be doing something that's completely legal one moment, that you've even gotten legal opinions on, that your practice is legal. And then next minute, the court says, no, you did a little something wrong here. Sorry. You're screwed. And you see this over and over and over again. There's nothing unusual about it.
There's so many ways you can slice and dice this thing. Your point, Kerry, about the Supreme Court never overturning anything coming out of the legislative branch or even executive orders and things of that nature, and what goes on in the agencies under the executive branch. I mean, the agencies are so sprawling that they create this administrative law octopus that I remember. I think it was either 2014 or 2013 when I think it was Congressman Massey stood before a pile of 81,000 pages of administrative law that was created that year versus about 4,000 pages that came from actual statutory law from the Congress. So our legal system. It backs up all of that, and it's almost like regulatory capture, to draw an analogy to what goes on with our agencies as well, too, because basically businesses and the corruption that comes in through the legal system is very similar to what happens with regulatory agencies falling asleep, like the SEC and Commodities Futures Trading Commission and so forth. I mean, they just don't do their jobs anymore because they're completely captured by special interests.
Well, yeah. It's kind of, it would almost be amusing if it wasn't so tragic. But those agencies were never out there to protect you.
Yeah, in many cases, they're not even constitutional.
Yeah.
They shouldn't exist.
So how can you be surprised when a guy like Donald Trump emerges and all of a sudden he's really getting traction, and you look and it's obvious, and yet the people, our rulers, can't understand how this guy is doing it.
Well, he can't be bought. From what I've heard from a good amount of people is they like Trump because, he speaks his mind and he's confident, and that he says that, he can't be bought by lobbyists, but yet, he says he used to buy lobbyists all the time. So this is just another of one of many, welcome to dystopia type of moments here. Like who is John Galt, like all these crazy things that keep going, and yet the system still endures. It finds a way to keep going. Kerry, it just seems, with all the lawyers, it seems like there's just too many lawyers here in the United States, and that, they're always looking for something to do, to meddle more, to change the laws. We see this with a lot of publicly traded companies where, any little thing that goes wrong with a publicly traded company on a stock exchange, it would be an enormous headache, because it seems like there's all these, frivolous lawsuits up the wazoo now and there's all these second, third, fourth guesses, all these armchair quarterbacks guessing on your every move, trying to sue you and remove you from a company you may have built.
Oh, yeah. Happens all the time. And when things are going well, when the economy's growing, then there's a much more let it be kind of attitude. But then when things go down the tubes, they're always looking for somebody to blame, and you wind up in the situation we find ourselves now, where even though you're not supposed to have ex post facto laws, that's for criminal, you really do have these laws that go back and tell you retroactively you did something wrong when at the time you didn't think you were.
You spend a lot of time talking to a lot of people on your show about the financial markets. I'm curious how you see the rule of law and the lack of it and its erosion in our current state impacting the markets going forward. I mean, what are your thoughts, and what are perhaps maybe even some of the insights that some of your guests have brought to your show that you can share with us?
Well, there's definitely been a decline in the rule of law. It's just shocking what's happened here. Really, really shocking. You just like Obamacare. That's, and the if you remember the GM and Chrysler bankruptcies, where they were prepackaged and just set up to give the store away to the unions, and this happens all over the place. It's happening all over the place. That's just one example of it, two examples. But judges were never intended to make laws, but that's something that's been going on for 200 years. Gay marriage, all that. It's just like abortion. It's a states' right matter. Let the states deal with it, and let's get on with things, because at least when the legislature deals with it, theoretically, it's the direct representative of the voters, and they're the best judge. And like I say, I don't really care. I'm a libertarian, and I think that the government does way too much. But if you're going to have these big policy changes, then let the legislature deal with it. They're designed to handle these kind of things. The courts have no business creating new rights or changing public policy. Then you have all this real resentment, rebellion among the people. We're still having that with abortion. And if they had just done it, through the legislature, and the same with marijuana. Personally, against all drug illegalization, because I think it's resulted in a mass violation of rights, and the courts have been right there saying it's okay. Just like the war on terror, whenever the government declares a war on some form of behavior that the public is engaging in, the public's going to get the short end of the stick.
And it's a surefire way to create more of what the war or the object of their war. You go have a war on drugs, you increase the drug use. You have a war on terrorism, and we increase terrorism. And it's the nature of government.
Yeah, and the war on poverty has also failed. I mean, Lyndon B. Johnson was one of those with his guns and butter programs, and, he started that. And, to add to your guys' points there about the war on drugs, I mean, instead of the Silk Road where people were peacefully buying drugs online and, people weren't getting stabbed or shot or things like that, I mean, it was turning into, a business that was eventually going to go legit where there wasn't any violent crime committed. The war on drugs has caused, humongous violent drug cartels to form, and it's caused prisons to be publicly traded stocks where the more inmates they throw in for whatever charges that they can put on them, the higher the prison industrial complex, the more they make money and things like that. So the incentives in society have just gotten so freaking perverse. It's just nuts right now. I'm surprised, Kerry, that the central planners have still been able to keep the game going. If you would have told me in 2008 that we'd still be basically most of the status quo for 7 years now, are you still surprised that they've been able to keep things going this long?
Oh, yeah. I never thought it was possible back in 2008, 2009. I mean, we were like 3 days away from all the supermarkets shutting down, the trucks not running. So, yeah, I was really surprised they were able to do it, but hey, never underestimate the powers that be. That's what I've learned.
Oh, yeah, these guys, I was talking with this about Eric this week, or a few days ago. A lot of these guys in power, the central planners, the people that believe in either Keynes or Marx or that big government is the key with central planning, a lot of these guys have, above 140 IQ, 150 IQ. They went to these Ivy League schools and things, so they're not dumb in a book smart, say. They may not have common sense. They may not have read any Libertarian or Austrian School of Economics. But, I mean, they're not dumb, and, they want to maintain their power structure and keep making money off the status quo. So they're going to look, I guess, for rules changes and things like that, whatever they got to do to keep the system going. I mean, there's so much the regular person on Main Street doesn't understand all the things that are going on behind the scenes to just keep the system going, I guess, for another day or another week or another month.
Oh, yeah. Well, look, who was thinking about Puerto Rico with all the other problems they had? And then all of a sudden, boom, Puerto Rico is there. Got to do something for Puerto Rico. But you see it over and over and over again. And really, they're really doing bad things out there.
Well, look what John Kerry just said, right, about the Iran deal when it doesn't sound good for American citizens, but didn't he say that, if we didn't do this deal, the dollar's hegemony as world reserve currency would be seriously threatened, right? He actually admitted that in public. I was surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in that context, he was speaking about a question that was posed to him about it, the possibility of going after our allies and pushing them around if they do not support sanctions in the event that the deal failed. So the reporting on that story was actually kind of strange. It was spun by media outlets that were trying to figure out a way to put a positive spin about the program and the deal overall. I think that's why they characterized it that way. I wrote an article about that on the News Doctors earlier this week. Or Saturday, I believe. But in any event, it's another example of the media kind of putting spin on stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, the media, that's what they exist for. And that's what they do.
And that's why we are in alternative media and why people are, in droves turning their back from the mainstream media. And we spent a lot of time on finance, and the audience withering at CNBC is pretty amazing and is a testament to that dynamic. They are now at the lowest ratings they've ever had in their entire existence.
Yeah.
Sometimes more people probably tune in to the stuff that you produce, Kerry, than what CNBC produces.
I wish, but yeah, at times that's definitely possible.
Believe it or not, I mean, in any given week, they can sometimes cruise along with just 200,000 total viewers in any given specific show, or maybe only 20,000. I mean, they're a shadow of what they used to be. And
so they're losing money then big on some of these shows then.
Yeah, I mean, only their flagship stuff carries the network, and they're probably only barely positive. And that just kind of speaks to what's happened to the withering of the middle class, participation of the middle class in the financial assets. I mean, maybe about 80% of the trades or higher on the New York Stock Exchange are all electronic. They're just algorithms going back and forth trying to fleece for like 1/4 of a penny for flash trading and on and on. I mean, The middle class has withered from about 33% reduction in median net worth since 2002 through to today. I mean, 2 bear markets and the hollowing out from financialization and the hollowing out of the industrial sector has taken its toll, and we see that in the financial markets and who participates in them.
Oh yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right. Could not agree more with you. And yeah, it's just a shell game there, and it's allowed by the legislators, by the regulators who are supposed to be protecting you, and then they wonder why people are cynical about the government and the real motivation of government. And really, you just have to look and see what happens in the markets and with individuals. So many of you just abandoned the stock market totally. And why is that happening?
Well, some Americans don't have savings, Kerry, so they don't have any money to put in the stock market except for their 401k or IRA. But yeah, the ones who do have capital, yeah, they're investing in startups. They're doing crowdfunding now. They're investing in crowdfunding and things like that. So yeah, the ones who have capital are looking for ways to make money outside of the stock market for sure.
Yep.
My next question for you, Kerry, since you're talking about what's going to be allowed by the central planners and things like that. Do you think the central planners, the Keynesian central bankers, these guys and the politicians, are they going to allow deflation for a long period of time? Because when I go back through financial history in the modern era, when central banking really started strengthening again, I really don't see any examples of long periods of a pure deflation being allowed. So what's your take on this?
I don't see how they can do it for that long, because look at the way the pension plans are all ready to go bust. That's at least to some extent the result of negative interest rates, and how much longer can it go on? The inability to get a yield when you're supposed to get just stay even in one of these public pension plans is 8%. So how do they keep doing it? I think there's got to be an end to it somewhere, but it's a balancing act, and we might be getting close to the end of it.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't see any way that they can allow deflation for a long period of time. They've committed to a strategy with the wealth effect, with financial repression. They want interest rates lower. They've teased about higher interest rates, but when you actually look at the math, and you see that Japan has a math problem, Europe has a math problem, the United States has a math problem with being able to pay the interest payments on their debt. So, if the interest rates normalize, there's no way the U.S. could pay them without having to print more money, because there's just not lots of demand for the bonds right now. So I don't see a way this math problem works with if interest rates go back up. So I see that the interest rates have to go lower, and they have to keep trying to prop up the asset markets, and maybe, for 6 or 12 months, or maybe I think it's a low probability event that they allow, deflation in quotes for longer than that. Maybe we do have another 2008 or worse crash in the near future where everything collapses, 30, 40% or more. But I would be shocked if they don't, go for broke then with even larger QE programs to move the asset prices higher back up in nominal value for a bunch of different reasons.
Yeah, it's bad for the banks and who owns the place. And the insurance companies, too. But bad for both of them, so how much longer can it go on?
Yeah, and they responded to the previous deflation crash, 2007 through 2009, by trying to reliquefy assets and the balance sheets of banks and this gigantic ongoing QE process, regardless of whether or not they're focusing on just changing duration values with Operation Twist or outright buying assets, all with an effort of pushing the price of bonds up by the increased demand. And there's also the issue of how much organic demand truly is out there. I mean, we really don't know, because central banks, particularly the Japanese and the Fed and the Bank of England and the ECB, have been buying so many of the credit instruments that the entire market has been distorted. And then when you distort the interest rates, you absolutely distort everything, because the price of money is another way of describing interest rates. And when the numeraire of all financial assets is now completely corrupted to the point where markets are artificial by and large. So the Fed is in a quandary at this point. They can't allow normalization of interest rates because that would blow a hole into the balance sheets of the banks that they saved in the first place.
They're trapped, but so is China, and so is Japan, and so is Europe. I mean, look, everyone has a debt problem, right? So, I mean, like, the only way, there's just not a lot of demand to sell these bonds to because they're not producing a good yield, and they can't raise interest rates to get more demand because then they can't pay the interest rates on the bonds. The only way, guys, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, the only way I think that they can keep the game going is by everyone trying to destroy their currency, printing up more currency to buy up their own bonds. That's the only thing that makes any sense to me from what it seems.
That only buys time, though. I mean, at some point...
Oh, yeah.
And this is the question I'd love to ask you, Kerry, is that, at some point, confidence has to come into the picture. I mean, we've had a 6+ year period where basically institutions and bond traders are willing to go in and try to ride the down move in yield and up move in price and scalp some, shorter-term trades out of that because the Federal Reserve had their back. But I think that at some point that's going to change in part because of credit's worthiness considerations and the need for being compensated for the risk that one takes when one takes on bond purchases. And also just this whole artificial nature of the interest rate structure as it has been distorted by central banks across the world. At some point, we have to normalize. We can't operate with interest rates the way they are now. So where do you see us going in the future? And I mean, I'm asking you to speculate because time frames are always a bit murky and no one has a perfect crystal ball. But what do you think is going to happen with the credit markets overall in the next year, 2 years or so?
Well, I think I can't say when it's going to happen, but at some point there's going to be an emergency, okay? Something is going to go wrong that these masters of the universe didn't contemplate, and it's just going to be a world of hell. They'll attempt to bail out, I guess. Bailout is the name of the game now, right? That's what it's all about. So I'm not big for timing, but I reckon that it'll start elsewhere and work its way over to the U.S. Because having the reserve currency means that that we're probably going to be the last to go, I guess. But again, don't take it to the bank because there's just no telling. Just no telling.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the stuff that's put out by the media, it's either partial truth or not truth at all. So, I mean, it's tough to tell when we're being told the truth or not by the media. So we might not find out for later that, there was these emergency currency swaps or, the BRICS Bank did this or the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank did that. And it's just really funny, Kerry. Like, I know you have Wall Street contacts still, but when I ask some of these mainstream guys who aren't libertarians, who aren't Austrian School economists, I ask them, do you see evidence of inflation in the asset markets? I think a lot of them bite their tongue and try to tell me not, so, that they can keep making money off the asset prices and try to tell me that there's no evidence. But as an Austrian School economist, there's plenty of evidence out there from reading von Mises and Rothbard. They both said that the inflation seems to go up. They both predicted that the inflation would not necessarily go into the real economy first, that it would go into the hands of the government and Wall Street first and would probably hit the capital markets.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because when they print money, when they create it out of thin air, you don't know where it's going to go. Mises always said that, always said it. So when you look at it from that standpoint, how else can this be? How else can it work? It's going to go inflate asset prices, housing, all of that stuff, and then consumer prices. So inflation, the whole definition of inflation by Mises wasn't consumer prices rising. It was the increase in the money supply. That's what he was talking about with inflation. And then it'll wreak its damage however it works. But you can't predict where that flow of new money is going to go, but you can predict that it's going to go create a bubble somewhere. Or I shouldn't say create the bubble, but really facilitate the bubble. I don't think the money itself creates the bubbles. I think the bubbles are in place, and basically then it's like gasoline on a fire. That's the way I look at it.
And it looks like some of that money, it was going into art and diamonds and, obviously real estate and things like that and rare collectibles. But we're starting to see the really, really wealthy, and whether that's Stanley Druckenmiller, who was, the main money manager for George Soros, who I don't know if he's ever owned gold in his life or not a large portion of it maybe. But, we're starting to see the really large people get spooked about the valuations in the stock market, and we're starting to see them start to put money into gold. Now, it hasn't affected the paper prices of gold and silver, but we're seeing evidence now that the really high net worth all over the world are starting to massively accumulate metal again.
Yeah, well, it's basically on sale, and when the price is going to go up, I have no idea, but at some point, it's going to happen, and because it just has to work that way, I would think. So far, we've been wrong, but much longer we'll be wrong for, I'm not sure of, but I will tell you that the money supply keeps going up, velocity is down. Once interest rates go up, it might well be that if they go up, that's when inflation starts because the loans start getting made. I don't know, but it's interesting to speculate over it. And everything has an effect that they do, whether it's intended or not, and that's what you really have to be wary of.
Now, moving on, since Eric didn't want to add anything on the precious metals right now, I want to start the Scumbag of the Week segment. This is our most humorous section of the Welcome to Dystopia podcast. Today's nominee, and Eric, you had articles on this on the News Doctors as well. I mean, there's evidence now that the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, intentionally dumped 3 million gallons of toxic sludge from an old mine containing massive amounts of lead and arsenic into the Animas River in Colorado to get extra Superfund cleanup dollars. Welcome to Dystopia, gentlemen. This is ridiculous. I thought the EPA's job was to prevent spills like this and not intentionally do them to get more cleanup dollars.
Yeah, protect the environment. I guess they missed something about the name of the outfit, right? They're to protect the environment, not to create environmental disasters.
Well, most of the EPA people are lawyers at the top, right? Are they even scientists? I mean, maybe the people at the bottom, but the people who are making the decisions don't really have necessarily the background to know what they're doing.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the oil spill off the coast of Louisiana. Just like look at all the play you get out of it, make business look bad, mining look bad. It's just got such a great outcome for them.
Even when true accidents are made, and it isn't intentional, there's just a lot of covering one's butt and circling the wagons in agency culture like this. And the EPA isn't so much infested with lawyers per se, Jason, but the problem there is more an example of ideology versus best practices informed by good science. The EPA has turned into an agenda-driven organization, and a lot of times the things that they recommend when it comes to environmental remediation, I mean, this mine was, I think it was over 90 years old. It was not in operation for some 90 years, and it was a tailings dam holding all of these toxic chemicals, and it was doing just fine. They did not have to do what they did to attempt to remediate the mine, and they could have taken more care, but instead, whether it was something that was intentional, and there is some evidence to suggest that that's in fact the case, or whether it was just a dumb accident, motivated by a rush to remediate something for ideological reasons, as opposed to just leaving it in state as it had been for decades without any trouble, remains to be seen. There's going to be a little bit more digging to find out what the ultimate story is here. But bottom line is that, this qualifies as for, scumbag of the week, because the agency is just, it's out of control. When you look at all the other things that is going on, not just within the EPA, but a broader scheme of things, from government policy focusing on climate change and carbon credits and taxation that's going to come later, and the whole bastardization of climate change science. I mean, and it's all driven more by ideology than actual scientific method. I published a story back in, I believe it was April, where the editor of the Lancet journal, this is the most respected medical journal in the entire world. Obviously, this one, I'm jumping tracks and moving to a different field, but nonetheless, it speaks to the reality of, what has happened in agencies or in environmental culture overall, and in the medical field. When it comes to medical journals, this editor had said that well over half of the peer-reviewed articles that are published in scientific journals are not true. They're motivated by money. They have conclusions that are brought to the table before the actual publication comes out and does the study. It's all about ideology as opposed to true science, and I think that this environmental disaster is going to prove that there's a lot going on here that fits that particular mold.
Hey, look, when we're talking about environmental disasters, what about what happened in China there? Those are some badass people there. They just knew it was going to happen, it appears. It's just like...
Have those guys been executed yet? The ones who survived, who were in charge of screwing it up?
I don't know whether they'll do it like in North Korea and assassinate them with anti-aircraft missiles. But one thing in China, they do have accountability, but not the accountability that you want to experience.
They don't even get a trial, right? They don't even get a trial to defend themselves, right? They're just
trial.
Come on, Kerry. We finally jailed one banker for LIBOR. I mean, 35-year-old who had basically no standing and was a lower end guy. But hey, that's the way that the financial system rolls.
Yeah.
Well, the regulators at the Department of Justice and the SEC, right, they've been told that they can't jail any of the high-name bankers, John Corzine, et cetera, right,
Sure.
because then they threaten to collapse the system. People will lose confidence in the system, right?
Well, even Eric Holder went out on record and said basically that. So, we can't jail. They're too big to jail because it would bring the financial system down.
Well, this is all a big mess, but... the good news is it can't go on forever, okay? It can't. There's just no possible way that it can, because there's, complex systems basically become unsustainable over time the more complex they get. And, hey, that's why I always believe you really do need to be prepared for whatever happens. Your bug-out kit, your financial bug-out kit, whatever it takes, you better be ready, because it's just a matter of time here.
Yeah, and it's also turning into basically like almost the end game of Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. I mean, obviously when she wrote the book, I think it was in the 1940s or so, she was a number of decades early, but, now things are starting to turn into that point where the system is just so lethargic that, all these crazy things have to be done to just prevent it from collapsing, next week or next month or things like that in so many different industries and things.
Hey, well, that's a great one. That guy in Seattle who decided to pay his employees a minimum wage of $70,000, and you brought it up. I think it was 21st Century Motors in Atlas Shrugged, which I forgot about. I'm gonna have to read the book again, honestly, because it's just such a great book and it's so timeless. But exactly what she said was going to happen happened. So it's just it's unfathomable that you can hold out hope over hope that a different outcome is going to happen. But in the end, socialism, socialistic systems always fail because they can't keep track of all the variables, and the profit motive and what we're looking at here, capitalism, is a way of putting a check on systems that really wouldn't exist otherwise. I don't think capitalism is perfect. True capitalism, I really do believe, with free markets, not what the United States has. It's amazing how many people, guys, believe that the U.S. has true capitalism. But we know better, or had for a while. No way. So basically, I'll go with the EPA. Not really a fan of them. They haven't really done what they were supposed to do, and the environment. They're there to protect the environment, and for some reason, I'm seeing a lack of protection taking place there.
Yeah, and I mean, there's, the other thing about socialism, Kerry, whether it's different forms of collectivism, I mean, eventually, like what Margaret Thatcher said, they run out of other people's money because they're not generating surplus. They're not generating capital or profit to be reinvested to grow more value, create more jobs, new products and services, etc. It gets to a point where someone like Bernie Sanders is popular, where he says, the consumer needs less choice. Why do we need, all these different types of deodorant and all these different types of food? We don't need all these different choices for things, but I mean, everyone's different, and choice is one of the keys in the economy because that leads to freedom and prosperity. The other nominees that I can bring up for Scumbag of the Week, whether it's the Planned Parenthood videos that keep coming out, Hillary Clinton is basically a permanent nominee. But, I've seen this now. I think this has to do with morality in our culture. The New York Post has a lot of stories on this. There's a lot of 20-year-old female teachers in high schools now who are having sex with 15 and 16-year-old boys. It's, a bunch of them every single month all over the country in the United States. I mean, this speaks badly of our culture here that is coming out. And I'm sure, men teachers are doing some of this, but almost all the stories now that I see all over the internet are female teachers, taking advantage of their students who are 15 and 16 years old.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. But, there's a double standard, too, in society, that it's not so bad for the guys, but it's real bad for the girls. So, that's what kind of deal with this, I think.
In a big picture, too, when basically the United States is an empire. We have, over the last 100 years or so, we've grown so large and so powerful, and now our society is beginning to wither and fray at the edges. When we look at the financial markets in particular, and the living standards of Americans and so forth, there's been so much erosion in terms of the culture, and we have this celebrity-obsessed culture. We just don't have our morals straight, and that kind of degradation of the fabric of society and its relation to the social compact is the kind of thing that you can see in the Roman Empire in its waning days, or even in the excesses when it comes to boom-bust cycles like in the 20s, when skirts rise, stocks rise, or vice versa, I forget to say. And
Bob Prechter,
yep.
Socionomic, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
even before Prechter, I mean, he borrowed it from someone else whom I cannot recall, unfortunately. But, the bottom line is that, we have, even in our own, in the monetary system in and of itself, the whole nature of money is a corrosive impact in our society now. You shouldn't even say money, I should say currency. I mean, this fiat debt currency monster that we've had distort pretty much everything. And this growth of the government and how that impacts social norms and the way people look at whether or not you have to pull yourself up from your bootstraps and so forth. That kind of the roots of the Protestant ethic that built America has been fraying at the edges as well from this whole financialization, hollowing out, and big government growing culture that we've had that is a product of the empire of the United States now in its latter days.
Yeah, well, degradation, corruption, and just the dissolution of morals.
Yeah.
Be the paragon. I don't want to be the person who's there policing morals, because morals can't be policed. You can't legislate morality. We all know this, right? There's no question about it. And yet, doesn't stop people from trying. And once you got to police morals, it's over. Yeah, you have the values in place, but the country's really taken a wrong turn somewhere along the way, and it's just I don't see a big improvement on it.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, we're getting to that end with empires, like you guys said, you know, with the British Empire and how corrupt and bureaucratic and how, you know, the horse and buggy whip people in the British Empire tried to, you know, kill the automobile industry and so many other immoral things in that empire. And you could go back throughout, you know, other empires, whether it's the Romans or the Chinese ones, and all the propaganda and corruption and inflation and taxes. You know, there's certain types of things, and I just finished a book on a book on the collapse of the Roman Empire. It was pretty good. And, you know, inflation and taxes, morality, corruption, you know, there's all these different factors that combine and that eventually lead to the decline in the empire. So morality is just one of the many things that declines. The last nominee I have, guys, for Scumbag of the Week is, and this just came out a couple days ago, these guys would be crony capitalists. That would be AT&T, who literally bent over and did anything the NSA said and turned over mass amounts of data. This is thanks to Edward Snowden, who I think is a hero and a whistleblower for risking it, but Donald Trump thinks should be assassinated. But, you know, I think Edward Snowden is a selfless hero. I saw him speak at a conference, you know, over Google Hangouts at a Libertarian conference earlier in the year. He spoke to a group of people, and, you know, he doesn't want the credit. He said he should have come forward sooner. But, I mean, you know, these companies are willing to hand over data and all this other personal stuff, you know, do anything the government asks, and they're not willing to protect their own customers. So it's just very frustrating. Maybe, you know, people will vote with their money, and they'll tell AT&T, you know what, I'm moving my business elsewhere. I don't want to be your customer anymore if you guys are going to do this to me.
Yeah, well, that would be the logical thing, you know, for people to do, but we've been so dumbed down here as a country that I just don't know if that's really going to happen or not there.
It's not even really an option because all the major carriers are cooperating with the NSA.
Yeah.
It's just that, you know, AT&T was the first. They actually were putting router boxes that traced all metadata back in 2004. So, I mean, well before Snowden was making his revelations, this information was already out. You know, we're in big trouble when it comes to the surveillance state, and it facilitates a hard fascism of a police state that can come later at the flip of a switch if we have a financial crash or some other kind of contingency that in the eyes of government justifies its unleashing of, you know, no more velvet glove surveillance state, but we go to something more dire.
Yeah, it's all totalitarian, right? It all fits under whether it's, you know, our privacy and information, or thought crimes from George Orwell, 1984, or financial, you know, with cashless society, bail-ins and bailouts. You know, people ask, oh, are they going to do bail-ins? Or, you know, they obviously want to do bailouts, but the word bailout has become politically unpopular, so they have to look for a new type of scheme to still do the bailout. So that's why I think bail-ins have become, you know, mentioned more. But, you know, cashless society, and they wanted to do this for decades. If you go back and listen to what Ron Paul said and all the people he's spoken to in the government, they wanted to do this for decades, but they didn't have the technology to do it. Now they do, because all money is basically digital now. It's not, you know, just Bitcoin that's digital. So all these things in these different types of categories in your life, they all fit into, you know, the totalitarian box, in my opinion.
Oh, sure. Well, you know, there's just every day there's more infringements, and it's what you've come to expect.
And the American people and people in the West in general are like boiling frogs. You know, the perception of our, you know, water temperature has gone up, but not enough people have woken up yet. But who knows? Maybe it'll be a financial crash that, in fact, wakes people up. It has happened before that way, and the odds are pretty good that that's what's going to happen this time around. But who knows the degree to which people will be able to see what happened and what the causes were, because so much of understanding about economics is about as bad as it's ever been in this country.
Yeah, I agree, Eric. It almost happened in 2008, right? We had the people start to come out with the pitchforks, and then all the money was printed, right? And they stopped trying to tell as much of the truth because the things were starting to come out, and they were like, oh, we have to move the stock market back up and all these other things. And then the people that were starting to wake up, a lot of them just were like, you know what, the money's printed. Okay, they told me it was a one-time deal. I believe them, I believe in big government and all these other things, and that they're trying to do their best and things like that. And, my stock market account on my 401k or IRA is back up, so it's not a big deal anymore, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, it goes back to the analogy that Catherine Austin Fitz talks about a lot, where she gave a speech and she told the people assembled, and they were mostly, the progressive types, wanted to do good, so to speak. And she said, if I had a big red button here, would you push it to rectify everything that's wrong within our financial system and end the drug trade? And, would you stop money laundering? Because money laundering is, upwards of maybe about $1 trillion worth of liquid funds that move into the capital markets every year and are a major reason why the capital markets are held up. And the response was predictable. People would fear loss of their net worth and their IRAs and 401ks and so forth, and they wouldn't want to a person, and 100-plus people who were in the room were unwilling to push this hypothetical red button if they could, have the power to fix everything in one day. And that's that system buy-in. People have a vested stake in the corruption and just the sheer structure and the lunacy of the way things are set up now. Just there's really. We joked earlier about how the Federal Reserve is stuck, that they have no way out. Well, to some extent, the general population that has wealth and is, aware, the upper middle class, they understand the problem as well, and in a subconscious way, if nothing else. I have told you the story about my cousin who went to MIT in the graduating year before Ben Bernanke, and he's a big mucky economist, and he's been responsible for, probably the single most important econometric program that is in all of the university systems and trains all of these Keynesians that come out of the woodwork in our university systems, and he sings the praises of Ben Bernanke. He thinks that Ben Bernanke saved the world, and it speaks so much to the academia biases that exist now in our economic structure. I mean, pretty much, as Nixon said, everyone is a Keynesian now, and there is very little understanding as to what's going on that creates these long-term problems that at this stage can't be fixed without some major reconciliation with financial crashes or God knows what.
Yeah, we're in a live science experiment now, guys. I mean, these guys have bad theory, and they're thinking that they have a theory working. These Keynesians do, and they're trying us. We're all in a really nasty, bad science experiment now. You could see evidence of this, whether it's Nomi Prince speaking to the Federal Reserve and the IMF people and their reactions afterward, or Bob Wenzel over at Economic Policy Journal, who's an Austrian School Economist, and he worked on Wall Street. And, he was allowed actually a speech at the New York Fed last year, the year before, and he brought up the Austrian School, and he had people asking him afterwards, they thought the Austrian School was the Chicago School with Milton Friedman and stuff. So, I mean, they're welcome to Dystopia. I mean, these guys haven't even read the other side's argument. They're so, blinders on.
And just for our benefit of our audience who may not know the story with Nomi Prince, she was invited to go speak at the New York Fed with, major people, like, I think Fisher was there. I don't think Yellen was there, but Fisher, second in command, I think, was there. And basically she said that after interacting with all of these, folk, she, in her opinion, believed that they had no clue what they were doing, that they were just kind of flying by the seat of their pants and experimenting. And to some extent, even Bernanke, in his public statements since he has left the chairmanship, has hinted that there is a great deal of experimentation going on, and so, there was that debate between, or I shouldn't say debate, discussion between him and Peter Schiff at a cocktail party as well that kind of hinted at that. So, we even have direct indication from people who have talked to a lot of these people that they're definitely running the economy like a Petri dish experiment.
Oh, yes. Well, unfortunately, we're all going to pay the price at some point. When it's going to happen, I'm not venturing a guess at this point, but it's going to happen.
Oh yeah, the people in power have been so good at kicking the can down the road. So I mean, the people, I think Kerry, pretty much since 2008 or 9, when they started printing the money and they changed the accounting rules for the banks, the FASB, a lot of people in the alternative community have been predicting crash every 6 months basically. Then, and the stock market has doubled basically since then off the bottom because of the money printing, and people need a yield, so they've been chasing the yield instead of going into money markets and other stuff and higher interest rate treasuries. They put the money into the stock market, into safer stocks and things like that. But my final question for you, Kerry, since you are an entrepreneur and with your Financial Survival Network, and I do listen to a lot of your podcasts. I don't have time to listen to all of them. I wish I did, but they are great though. And you do interview a lot of entrepreneurs and people who built their own business who make money outside of the stock market and exchange. Eric and I, when we do these things, welcome to Dystopia, it's sarcastic, it's gallows humor. We don't want to be too super negative at the end. What are some, you're with the Financial Survival Network, one of your mottos is to survive and thrive. What are things people can do then to maybe boost their income or start a business and things like that to protect themselves more so, regardless of whether we have inflation or deflation, stagflation, hyperinflation, etc.?
Well, the first thing, of course, is you have to invest in yourself. Human capital, training, knowledge, all of that. Because, look, it starts with you. So you invest in yourself, you get more skills, and get skills that are relevant, not skills that, like becoming a puppeteer or something, isn't going to cut it. And that's where you start. And then from there, it goes on to looking for additional cash flows, streams of income, all of that. I mean, not enough time to really talk all the possibilities, but always be learning, and you might have a chance of getting through this thing. If you're not learning, then it's all going to come upon you as a total shock, and you face potential devastation.
You had mentioned earlier the financial bug-out bag, and I was curious if you can expound on that.
Yeah, well, I just view like you never know, like, not so much financial, because you have natural disasters that take place ongoing. So you should be prepared anyway. But having some precious metals as an insurance policy, not saying you're going to get rich off of them. Nobody knows that. But, hey, they've screwed up before. Government's going to screw up again. So just be prepared for it, because it's going to happen. At some point, I don't know when, but it will happen. And if you're not prepared, you're going to be it's not going to be good for you. Put it that way.
Yeah, a lot of people I speak to, Kerry, they don't have the income and the savings to be able to buy all these different types of inflation hedges. So whether it's a good amount of gold, good amount of silver, storing the metal in all these different countries, buying a few rental properties, maybe owning some organic farmland, having, full food and water and medicine for prepping, owning, guns and ammunition and things like that, and other cash flow investments. They don't have the money to do all of these things immediately. And then they asked me what they should do. And I said, well, you know what? If you really want the ability to do this, first you need to sacrifice your time, work hard maybe, and add skills so you can boost your income. And then once you boost your income, if you have a plan and you can do this maybe over a couple years, and, they may be able to kick the can down the road for another couple years. But if you have a plan and you can boost your income with more skills, with jobs on the side or starting a business or getting a raise at work or stuff like that, you have more money coming in, and that gives you options, and then you can invest it. So that doesn't mean if you get more money coming in, you should be going, on all these extra vacations and things like that. But, most people, I guess it's because of the school system and they weren't taught a financial education and things like that. But it's just common sense that, if you don't have the money to buy the things that you need to protect yourself, that you need to figure out the things you need to do to add the money that you need your income, so you can buy all these different things so you have all these different insurance plans and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Eric, any more points before we let Kerry go here on the show?
That's a pretty good place to wrap. I enjoyed speaking with you.
Well, I really enjoy your podcast, Kerry. Keep up the great work. I've been involved with it since the beginning. I think I've been coming on every couple months, and I still enjoy it. And I released 3 new rules there on your show, so that's what I think you're just doing a great job. And I think you should probably have your own show on radio or TV. You definitely are better well versed than the people on CNBC and Bloomberg.
Yeah, well, that was why I started it, really, to teach people economics in a way that wasn't threatening, that didn't make them feel inferior, or didn't make you feel like you're a dummy. Because I think all these concepts can be understood if you take time out and explain them in a good way, entertaining way, and a way that resonates with you.
Yeah, I agree. You just do a great job. Now, for our listeners out there who aren't familiar with your work, how do they find you?
They can just go over to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. They can look up Kerry Lutz on iTunes Store for the podcast, and then just subscribe to it. And we've got a Facebook group, a closed one now that I see you're in, called FSN Connect, and I post entertaining or informative articles every day or so, and we're trying to really create a dialogue there, which I think is extremely important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, what you said with choosing yourself and financial education, I think that's the way to go because, the people in power, they can print money unlimited. They control all these fancy weapons and things like that. We're not going to beat them. We're not going to beat them, with the conventional ways. It's going to have to be, through education and through waking more people up that way. And that's just how things are going to go if we want to do it peacefully and the right way is the smart long-term strategy.
Exactly. Thanks for having me on. I do enjoy your work greatly. That's why we have you on the show. And
yeah, we're almost at 1 million views, too, on our YouTube channel. It'll be less than 6 weeks now.
That's great. That's great to hear. Well, I'm glad it's going well, and I look forward to joining you again and having you back on the show.
Okay, well, thanks again for your time, Kerry. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kerry.